you know, not only is it our responsibility to provide direction to our kids now, but we hope that that direction follows them for the remainder of their life. And so at the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk about some guidelines based on the ages of the kids that you're working with, or the kids you have in your family, or just, you know, as you're thinking about, well, what does this look like for a kid who's 9 compared to a kid who's 16? And then how do we kind of like, in some ways, loosen the reins so that we can, you know, let kids kind of have some freedom to live out those guidelines and rules that we've put in place earlier in their lives. Because at some point, yes, we do have to kind of let them go, right? That's kind of the point. We can't be monitoring our 30-year-old's internet usage. At least I don't think that's probably a good idea. So we hope that we can train kids and teenagers now so that when they're adults, they can model and demonstrate some of those same behaviors. It's never a guarantee, but definitely what we're hoping. Okay, now my slides don't want to advance. Okay, so just some questions for you. Like, what do you guys want to know, or what do you wonder about? What should I make sure we talk about? So this is the time for you to kind of provide any questions, direction, comments that you'd really like us to see addressed today. Anything specifically?
I could speak into that.
Thank you.
So I'm Becky. I'm from Safe Church in Canada, and I just have a lot of coordinators reaching out to me to get some guidelines for how GEMS should be working this year. What the other area is always about, as people are going to Zoom and recording all their services, you know, I don't know that it's as much now, but if now they're thinking moving forward with this, if we stick to Zoom, how do we keep kids safe if they're, you know, doing children's ministry, like, and the pastor's having them come up to the front and speak, like, so all just privacy issues around moving forward once we're out of COVID and looking at, we've got all this technology that we're appreciating now, we're wanting to implement it. What is that next step going to look like? That would be my
Sure. Yeah. So for your GEMS program, are you not meeting face-to-face right now?
Currently, in most people that I'm in Ontario, no. So they're looking at different options and how they could, and in the summer it was Vacation Bible School, how they could do that safely.
Right, right. Yeah, so giving kids access or trying to make sure that they have access to your GEMS program, to your church services, definitely also opens them up to some risk as they're, accessing Zoom and other media platforms. Yeah, good question. Any others?
Well, I have a technology background, and I'm kind of curious about best practices among churches. Should we worry about filtering some content when we supply internet at churches and things like that? I know schools are doing that quite a bit. Just a curiosity.
Sure. Yeah, good question. Anybody else?
Well, she'll be on the participants in this workshop.
I'd be interested, Erin, to know, I'd be interested to know using like group messaging for groups like a youth group or whatever, like is that a safe idea? Is that a bad idea? Snapchat group, text message group, something like that. Like what's a good practice there?
Okay, well, I will hopefully touch on some of those throughout my presentation, but then if we get to the end and we haven't, then we can kind of talk about those more directly at that point. Any others? Otherwise, we'll keep moving. All right. So yeah, here's all my P's. power, positives, and protection. So we know that technology, that the internet has a significant amount of power. So I'll talk a little bit about what that is and the impact that it can have on kids and families and just your church in general. Sometimes I feel like technology and the internet get kind of a bad rap, and social media, we spend a lot of time focusing on the bad things that come with these platforms. And I do want to spend a little time today thinking about, is it all bad? I mean, should we just get rid of it altogether? Or can we really try to emphasize and highlight the positive parts of these things as well? Because I truly believe that there are some positives that we can try to build upon, while also balancing that with, the protection that we need to provide because of the risks that come. Okay, so here's more P words. So the power, thinking about, access to pornography that we know is prevalent throughout internet access, sexual solicitation. So those would be the predators that lurk on the internet and sometimes seek out specific social media platforms to try to reach certain kids. Cyberbullying, violent gaming, gambling. Even kids can have access to online gambling. They can get involved with hate groups, self-harm sites. This is something that I more recently became aware of, that kids who are looking for specific methods of self-harm. So, there's groups out there all about cutting and kind of like just helping, really kind of proliferating this idea that, cutting is a normal thing and cutting is good and this is why I do it. And so, kids who are kind of prone to that or have started that behavior can go seek out these groups and really get kind of encouraged to continue in those behaviors. And then just general computer security concerns, helping kids realize that, hey, it's not a good idea for you to put your name and your address and your phone number in any sort of internet arena, but especially with social media, just making sure that they're safe with their personal information. And yeah, recognizing that the things that you put on the internet by no means can be considered private. And so we need to be extra cautious about those things. So in that, we see that there's a lot of power, right? That depending on kind of what avenues we involve ourselves in or our kids involve themselves with, that there can become a lot of power. If you think about gaming, that can become an addiction. I've heard, I'm a college professor, but I definitely don't spend a lot of time in the dorms. But I can even think about when I was a college student, and some of my male friends would, play video games for hours and hours on end. And what I hear is that that's become even more prevalent as we have, internet access to games, and you can play with people across the world, across the United States. And so you think about, actually what research shows us is that those things change structures in our brain. They kind of re-navigate neural pathways. We get dopamine response, just like any sort of other addictive behavior. We can, have those responses with certain internet activity, but especially thinking gambling and gaming. But I've even heard with social media that you can have, you get dopamine response when you're scrolling through Facebook, or, someone comments on one of your posts, that actually can become kind of an addictive behavior that we keep returning to kind of get that brain response. Okay, so the prevalence. One of my colleagues at Dort talks about how we kind of assume that our kids and our teenagers, our college students, that they're digital natives, meaning they're very familiar with the internet. You know, they can teach us things about technology, and that they, because they've grown up with it, they're, you know, it's their like familiar playing ground. And so they're, you know, we assume that they're natives, that they're comfortable, that they know what they're doing, that they know how to keep themselves safe. But actually what we're finding is that most teenagers, kids, college students, and I would say even, you know, middle-aged people like myself, we're generally pretty digitally naive. We really don't know as much as we think we know. We don't recognize the power that these technologies can have. We don't know the avenues in which our privacy can be violated. And even I find for myself, if I'm scrolling through and I'm, you know, in preparing for this presentation, I was looking at some of the statistics about children being exposed to pornography on the internet, people getting in or having strangers contact them and try and solicit them or groom them. I kind of find myself thinking, no, that can't be true. That's not possible. That's like that research, that statistic has to be incorrect. Or I tend to think like that might be true elsewhere, but that's certainly not true here or for kids in the church. So I think it's easy to kind of put this like shroud of protection around ourselves and think, this can't be happening where I live. This can't be happening with the kids that I know. This can't be happening in my household. And so we do, I mean, it's easy and it's more comfortable to be naive about what's actually happening. And then we can not have those hard conversations. We can kind of choose to ignore maybe warning signs that we're seeing, or, you know, just assume that our kids are going to do what's right and good and God honoring in their activity with technology. So yeah, some of those statistics, like, you know, they say that kids 6 to 17, 42% of them have been exposed to hardcore pornography while browsing online. I was watching a video yesterday, and I thought about sharing it with you, but I thought it would take up too much of our time, about how YouTube uses like sneaky search terms. So they, you know, they kind of like just slightly change a search term because they know what is popular with kids. And then, you know, kids unintentionally are searching for this video that their friend told them about, and then up pops this, you know, completely inappropriate video. Or just, you know, the fact that YouTube runs on, you can have it set so that it just keeps running and running and running. So a kid could be watching a video, you know, by like, I don't know, my boys like these guys called Dude Perfect. So they could be watching a dude, and they are pretty fast and like pretty cool guys if you watch them, and then just the things they do, the tricks they do. But so they could be watching Dude Perfect, and then up pops some other video because, you know, people have realized that Dude Perfect has, I don't know, billions of followers. I don't know if it's that many, but, and then up pops something else and they unintentionally click on it, or it's just on like auto run. And then, you know, there's this video that's completely unrelated to Dude Perfect and inappropriate. And it can really just take kids down a pathway that, you know, they didn't intend and that parents are assuming would not happen as they're trying to watch a video that, you know, seemingly is innocent. Kids often pretend to be older online. So, you know, a lot of social media platforms have age minimums, so they can't sign up for Snapchat or Facebook until they're 13. Kids know how to lie and say that they're an age that they're not. And a lot of kids are doing that to try and gain access to those platforms. 1 in 20 kids have met with strangers that they've met on the internet and arranged a secret meeting with them. So these predators are grooming them. Maybe they're lying about their ages. And so they're, trying to find kids who will kind of go along with that and arrange a secret meeting with them somewhere. So the grooming that takes place, I think, is, pretty common and pretty frightening in terms of what these people are trying to do and the methods that they're using to get kids to, tell them information about where they live or what they're doing or what they're interested in. And it all seems innocent on the surface. And there can definitely be some predatory purposes behind it.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay, so what about privacy? If you're thinking about, kids and their phones, and I'm thinking, as church leaders, if you're talking with parents and a parent says to you, well, what do I do? My kid says, well, it's their phone, it's their computer, I should trust them. I should, let them have complete and total privacy when they're using social media. How do you handle that? What do you think are guidelines that we should share with parents about respecting kids' privacy when it comes to their internet usage or social media platforms? I'm sure some of you are parents and have navigated this yourselves. So what do you do? What are your kind of best practices or ideas about what that looks like?
I'm not quite there yet because of the age of my kids, but
Mm-hmm.
the dads of the podcast 5 Minute Fatherhood addressed this recently, and they had this really beneficial thing of like, a lot of people feel it's an invasion of your kids' privacy when you like break down trust because they've already made a bad choice, and that a really solid way around that is, in the first place, be like, this is my phone that I let you have, and here's the contract of my access and your ability to do apps from day one, so that it's like, if you break the rules, you made that choice and it's done, and it's just very transparent up front. It helps them have more responsibility, it helps there be more trust by starting with that open communication of like, this is what we're going to do, and you have freedom as far as you don't abuse it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so setting up an agreement right from the beginning that says, this is not your phone, this is my phone, or, our family's phone or your parents' phone, and therefore, what's yours is mine, and so I should be able to access and review anything that you're doing, any activity. I know of people, and I do this from time to time, where it's like, okay, give me your phone, and then I spend some time just kind of scrolling through and looking at what they're doing and who they're talking to, and what their activity is in terms of social media, but internet searches and things like that. So yeah, really this beginning, I like that when your kids start to access or have a phone or have a computer, that the understanding right from the beginning is you have no privacy. This is an open book for me and for parents right from the beginning. I like that. Any other thoughts or ideas?
I was just thinking about especially some of the movement about how much freedom to give to kids, how early. And then I think, that precedent where when we allow them to have access, it'll just continue to unfold from there. And so I think it's important to have that intentional thought about how mature is my child to be able to handle what is accessible to them, because it will just unfold from there. And so once you start allowing it, it's really hard to go back. And so I think that initial freedom, when that should happen, is worthy of visiting, because it's really hard to backpedal once you let it go. So, and some kids might be ready before others. I'm just thinking about my own children, about just their maturity and discipline and like regulation when they might be better than others. Right.
Yeah, I've seen a campaign. I I don't know, it's like wait until
Wait
8.
till 8th. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great resource to direct parents to also, if they're, you know, debating or wondering, like, when is it an appropriate time for me to give my kid a phone, a smartphone? You know, there's definite benefits there, especially as, you know, a lot of households have gotten rid of, you know, landlines, just the ability to like know where your kid's at, or for them to be able to reach you when they need to. So, you know, there's definite benefits, but I think that, you know, we also need to weigh that with the risks. And as Tara said, once you start down that path, it's really hard to like then go backwards and say, oh, you know, never mind, now we're going to take that back. Or, you know, you had all this freedom, but now I'm going to try to, you know, take some of those things away, or not allow you to have as much privacy as you did at first. But I think if a violation occurs, and especially like Scott said, if you have a contract and they violate that contract, then I think, you know, obviously then you can point back to the contract and say, well, you violated this and here are the consequences.
And I just add for myself, like my kids are, one's in high school, one's in university. So when they were starting out with that, and I would say that's about the age, like grade 7, grade 8, where it was realistic and helpful for them to have phones, especially when they're traveling to school alone. A lot of the moms that I was friends with, we all just were also following each other's kids, right? Like on Instagram, because at that point,
yeah,
very comfortable with that, right? And also they forget that you're on it. Because they're not necessarily following you back. But it was also a good way to just to see what the kids' circle of friends was doing, be able to have conversations when, you know, some of the kids were posting stuff that you're like, I just don't think that's appropriate that you're in that circle. So it allowed just for open conversations and just the safety of other kids, knowing that there was sort of a circle of moms that were caring. And if they needed to reach out, that happened sometimes. If something came up that they really needed another mom, if they couldn't get care of their own, then they would chat you on Instagram, because a lot of them didn't have data any other way to connect to you.
That's a great idea. Just a unique way of, you know, thinking about, like, it takes a village to raise a child. Here we've got like a virtual village, and just a way, an added layer of protection and accountability for your kids. But it's also not that they're just there to like be a watchdog, but also somebody that they can rely on if they need it. That's a great idea. Any other thoughts about privacy or just access to your kids' social media or internet activity? So yeah, one thing, and we were talking about this earlier, is, you know, across the board, they say a good practice for any kid of any age is to not allow them to have a computer with internet access in their rooms, you know, all the time. So they might take it to their room. If they have a laptop, take it to their room to do homework, because a lot of homework is web-based these days. So they can take it to their room to do homework, but then at the end of the night, the computer, maybe their phone, you know, any point of access that they'd have to the internet comes to a central location and is monitored, you know, from a certain point in the evening. We'll talk a little bit about some of the technology that's out there that parents can utilize to monitor their kids' activity. But a lot of the programs out there actually give you the give you the power to shut off the internet, shut off your kids' cellular data. And so, you know, maybe some parents have said, I don't know if you can do that with laptops, but I know you can do it with phones, that you can shut off or just limit their access from this point in the evening until this point in the morning. But I don't know, sometimes I'd be a little leery to know. Kids can, you know, Google those things and find ways around that. So it's never 100% guarantee that you're actually completely limiting their access. But those programs and software options are out there for parents to use if they don't want to, hey, everybody bring your computer to the kitchen at 9:00. If you have a lot of kids, that could be a lot of devices to monitor. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, I don't want to spend all the time thinking, oh, the internet is bad. I'm just going to, like get rid of the Wi-Fi at home and never let my kids have a phone. I don't think we're in a day and age where we can say that kids can't have computer access. My high schooler, all of her work is on Google Classroom. So, if she didn't have access to the internet, she couldn't do like 80% of her homework. So there are positive things, right? And I actually really like Google Classroom, especially in the world with COVID, when the kids all got sent home. We weren't taking huge piles of books home because everything was right there on Google Classroom. So there are really good things. And that's just one example. So some of the positives are social connection. Now, again, when I think social connection, right away my brain goes negative. And I think about how kids, when I was a teenager or a middle schooler, I didn't really know what my friends were doing on the weekends. Now, because of social media, kids can see that they're missing out on things. So-and-so's, having a party and I didn't get invited. All of these people are, hanging out, having a social event, and I'm not there either because I couldn't go or because, nobody told me about it. So there's definitely that. But then I think if you are the kid that maybe didn't get invited, you can maybe connect with another kid that didn't get invited through FaceTime or, a chat, a text message, and you can feel like, hey, I'm not alone, even though we didn't get included, we can connect around this and maybe build a new friendship. And maybe that wouldn't have happened if they didn't have that social media connection or the ability to communicate in that way. It can be a really creative outlet. My daughter, she probably wouldn't be very happy if I told you this, but I don't think she'd care. She, for the longest time, wanted a YouTube channel. I don't know. She just thought she's kind of dramatic and just really wanted her own YouTube channel. And I had no clue, nor could she tell me like what she was going to do on said YouTube channel. So we let her have one once she turned 13. She recorded like 7 videos. We limited the privacy. And it was really a creative outlet for her. She and her friends had a ton of fun creating these videos. They would I don't know, one time they went downtown and showed, this rock that we have in town, and put that on her YouTube video. One time she showed how she would design her own house. So it really for her was kind of a fun creative outlet, but literally it lasted 5 videos and then she was done. So this thing that she'd begged for years and years and years turned out to not be something that, was a lifelong pursuit for her. So yeah, those friendships, those connections, learning can take place on the internet. I can't tell you how many times in our house we Google something because we don't know, or we ask Alexa, Alexa, how far is the moon from the earth? Or how long would it take us to get to Mars? So having that access to that information, it can be kind of fun, and it can allow kids to kind of learn things that maybe wouldn't have been easily accessible to them previously. Any other positives you can think of or examples? Yeah, Becky? And then John?
I just have a fun one, with my kids, just my youngest being in COVID and trying to, they're in cohorts, so they only see a quarter of their friends. They've just set up a schedule for the whole month of October, and every day they have a different costume, right?
Cool.
So it's yeah, My Little Pony, like you name it, they've done like
Mhm.
31, so they were stretching. But it was fun because then they would post it within their close friends on Instagram, and just that little group got to just participate. I thought that was a really creative way to just continue relationships in
Mhm.
the middle of, a very frustrating year.
Right. Very, where it can be isolating. It's a
Yeah,
point
but
of
it wasn't
connection.
fully shared. It was just shared
Right.
within
Right.
the close friend group,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, that's great. John?
Yeah, something I've noticed, I was not part of the generation to be involved with social media and so on, but I've noticed that the different relationship between parents and children, that parents are very aware of where their children are.
Mm-hmm.
When I left the house growing up, my mom didn't know where we lived, where we were, and we didn't want her to know. Now
Right.
kids just assume your parents know where you're at and they're comfortable with it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a positive.
Yeah, definitely. They don't like it usually. At least my teenager doesn't. Last night she was at a football game, and then I had to meet someone somewhere to pick her up at like 11:15 because she's a cheerleader. And I was like at the house to pick her up right at the right moment. And she was so confused. How did you know or like when to pick me up? I was like, I was tracking you the whole time you were coming home from the football game. She really didn't care there because, that was just less time she had to wait. But yeah, sometimes they don't like it that, I know one of the apps you can actually track your kids' speed. So if they're driving, it will notify you if they're driving over a certain speed. So, I mean, I think there's really good things about knowing where your kids are at, and especially with driving fears. But I have had conversations with friends too who say, well, I think we've taken it too far. Kids, it was good that my parents didn't know what I was doing and where I was, because then I had to hold myself accountable for my behavior, where I tend to err a little bit more on the side of caution and think, it's okay that I know where my 15-year-old is. I mean, I should know where she is anyway, but I think that monitoring where they're at and what they're doing is mostly a good thing, and not like an overreach of your maybe if you're doing it for your 25-year-old, that might be a little bit a little bit of a privacy violation. Any other positives?
I just think there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning that's going on with YouTube and the way, we make videos to. And I know youth teens that they're trying to work on their car and they can just look up, hey, how did he replace his starter, and figure it out. And there's just a lot more of that that's happening today that didn't before, and I think most of that is really good.
Yeah, definitely. You can Google or look up on YouTube how to do about anything. So you don't need a washing machine repairman. Just look it up on YouTube and watch it in slow-mo, and they'll show you exactly how to fix that specific part of your washing machine. I was thinking about, so I usually teach a course on families in the spring for our undergrads. And so last spring I was teaching that, and we do a whole unit on technology and how social workers can guide the families that they're working with in some of these same avenues. And I had a student, she was just really bright, like energetic, creative person, really free spirit, and and her dad's a pastor. And it surprised me because we were talking about like what guidelines their families had set up for them when they were kids and teenagers. And she said, my parents had no guidelines. They just like let me do whatever. They never checked my phone. I was able to have my computer in my room, and she thought that was actually a good thing, because then she right away learned how to kind of like regulate her own usage and her own internet behavior. She said, I'll admit there was a time there that I was addicted to, what app was it? I think it's whatever TikTok used to be. And she's like, and my parents, they had no clue what it was. They didn't really care. They never expressed any interest, but she somehow learned to kind of like, monitor herself. And it really caused her to kind of grow up in terms of her internet usage more quickly than others. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the case for all kids, because as Tara was saying at the beginning of the session, or a little bit ago, there's a lot of personality variability there as well. Some kids just do kind of self-regulate themselves more easily. They follow the rules more easily than other kids. So I'm not saying that her experience would be the experience of all kids, but I just thought it was interesting that she was now questioning, like, why did my parents give me so much freedom? And yet she thought that for her, that was actually a good thing, because then she really had to learn how to do those things on her own. Okay, so just in terms of parenting, so if you're someone, who's like leading a small group for parents or a Bible study for parents, what you're going to see typically is like three different types of parenting styles. Now there's variability within these. We very rarely do parents fall into one category, as we see here, but we have authoritarian, permissive, and authoritative. So authoritarians this is how I describe it in class, is like my way or the highway. Like, you're living under my roof, it's my rules. If you don't like it, get out. So there's not a lot of negotiation. It is, this is what we're doing, and you will follow these rules. So, probably how a lot of us were parented. I think this was kind of the default parenting method for many decades. And then on the flip side, you have the permissive parents that are like, do whatever you want. This sounds like, the girl that I was telling you about, whose parents, gave her a phone, but then really didn't do anything to monitor her usage. So permissive, or sometimes you'll hear them called laissez-faire parenting, where it's like free range, you do what's good for you. And I'll kind of be there to make sure that you don't, like, I don't know, hurt yourself in the meantime, or hurt yourself too drastically. And then authoritative parents are kind of in between, the middle ground. So if you do any reading on parenting styles, this is the one that they say is, usually leads to like the most well-adjusted, self-regulating kids, because they get a little bit of freedom. They get the ability to kind of negotiate with their parents. It's about like respecting them as people and individuals, respecting their personality differences, and having it be more of a democracy rather than a dictatorship that you might see with a more authoritarian type of parenting styles. So that really is going to impact how parents manage technology and social media. And trying to encourage parents to think about, how can this be kind of a negotiation? Some things are not negotiable, right? Having access to your kid's phone, not negotiable. When you can access social media, not negotiable. Not having access to the internet in your room after a certain point of the evening, not negotiable. But maybe recognizing that there are some areas that we can kind of work together to come to some sort of agreement. So if you're thinking about, as church leaders, and I hear this often, that, like going back to Proverbs 22, verse 6, where we're training up a child in the way that he or she should go, that doesn't all just fall on the parents, right? That it's kind of this three-part responsibility between the church, the school, and the parents. And so if we as the church or even the school are just kind of assuming that that's parents' responsibility to, help shape their kids' behaviors around technology and social media, I think we're failing a little bit, that this is at least partly the responsibility of the church and the school as well. So I kind of think about this like, no, never mind, I won't go there. Can we assume that parents are talking with their kids about technology usage? And if not, then how, as church leaders, can we encourage them to to make this a topic of conversation, or to make this something that they're thinking about and considering. And how do we support them? That next question. And share that responsibility in protecting kids. Any thoughts there, or things that your church is doing or has done, or things your school has done? I know I've seen schools bring in speakers to talk to parents about, just various aspects of how to keep kids safe. But I think it needs to be more than just like, hey, we brought in a speaker and everybody attended and, they learned something. It should be like a continuing conversation. So thoughts on that, or ideas, or just things you've seen that have worked well?
It's so quiet.
It is. I wonder if that means that.
I do have, I know for my kids' youth group, we had a parents' evening just with COVID, just to kind of say how the youth group was changing and just what measures they were doing to keep our kids safe. And I think it also, just in them being very open about the rules and regulations for the church as a whole, then it also just helped us understand, how we could maybe be a bit more aware in our own world. So that was very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John?
Something similar to that, instead of parents meeting with the youth group, occasionally I've done it where I invite parents, especially of high school children, to come together and talk about our common issues and how we handle that. And in the process, the parents realize they're not alone in dealing with these and these similar struggles. Also, they may feed on each other, give each other helpful ideas. And it kind of gives them permission to do what they wanted to do, but they hesitated.
Very good. Yeah, so that kind of almost support group model where they can share, realize they're not alone, that a lot of the concerns and questions and, pushback maybe that they're getting from their kids is what other people are experiencing as well. And that can just be reassuring to know. And yeah, sharing of resources and ideas. And it's a great idea. I see a lot of value in that. Okay, I think we're almost out of time. I did want to go back to, someone had a question about using group messaging like Snapchat and Facebook groups for youth group. Certainly right off the, my first response is, yeah, it makes sense because kids use those platforms to communicate with each other. They have their own group chats. I think if you're going to use it for a church purpose, like a youth group or GEMS or something like that, GEMS seems like they'd be a little young for that, but a youth group, that there would be some adult monitoring that usage. So, I don't know with Snapchat if there's any way that you can be confident that they've not gone and created their own group. But any church sponsored group that gets set up should continually be monitored by, a youth group leader or someone else in the church to make sure that, what they're talking about and what they're saying to each other is appropriate and, God honoring. But again, you can't necessarily restrict their ability. I don't think with Snapchat, you can't restrict their ability to just go and create their own kind of secret group that you're not a part of. Those things are probably happening anyway. But I think it's it shows that you recognize that these are the ways they communicate. So if you're setting up a group text, I don't know. I don't think our college students even text that much anymore. It's all Snapchat and other social media based ways of messaging. So in a way, by communicating in that way, you're showing that that's how they communicate and that you know that and want to respect that. But to say that there's no risk in that, I would be lying, because there's always some risk. Any other questions. Oh, I didn't get to the guidelines. I can send these to you. Yeah, there's just a lot of resources out there about, like, if we think about training up a child when they're children so that when they're older, they don't depart from it. And we're thinking about that in the context of social media and internet protection. There's just a lot of good guidelines about how we can start when our kids are young. And then, this model that I have here, kind of like you just kind of slowly loosen the reins and let them have more freedoms. So that then by the time they're 18 and maybe moving out of their homes, then, the guidelines that you've put in place and the behaviors that they've already started demonstrating will kind of become their normal way of interacting on social media and with the internet. So sorry, we ran out of time. But you could find these things. I can share with you. Here's a couple resources, protection softwares that are out there. Bark will actually notify parents anytime there's any questionable content. So I actually have this one, or I'm like trying it out right now because I got interested in it when I was doing the research for this presentation. And it was funny because my daughter had an assignment that came through her email, and it was a vocab assignment, and like all the words in the vocab were kind of violent. And so Bark flagged it and sent me an email saying, uh-oh, Haley got something in her email that looks violent. I was like, what? So I went in there because it's her school email, and it was her vocab assignment that had words like attack. And so I just thought that was quite humorous. I guess it's working. Circle is one you can get on your phone where you can shut off their internet. You can set a time limit for the amount of time they can access certain social media platforms. And then we have Verizon Smart Family. That's how I knew when my daughter was going to get to Sheldon last night. So I had to pick her up after the football game because you can track where they're at. This one doesn't allow you to track their speed if they're driving, but you at least know where they're at. You can shut off their apps. You can shut off the internet. You can filter content. But I will, with all of these, and there's others out there as well, just know that they're not 100% safeguard. So you can't just sign up, or parents can't sign up for these and think, well, I'm good. My kids are safe. No, you still need to be monitoring. You still need to be, violating their privacy by looking at their phone. So never encourage a parent to sign up for these and then think that it's smooth sailing and that, everything's perfectly safe, because that's just not the case. There are definitely faults in each of these and other software out there. Here's some resources. Covenant Eyes is another protection software. I've not looked at that one that much. Common Sense Education. I like that one because it really highlights some of the positive things about internet usage. And I think it gives some sample family contracts like Scott was talking about. So there's some contracts that you can use there to use as like talking points with your kids, or, share them with the parents that you're working with so they can use those with their families. Enough is Enough is, I think, an advocacy group that's trying to say, hey, like what can we do to try to make sure that the internet is safer for our kids? How can we, limit pornography access or just the amount of pornography on the internet? And then Glow Kids is a book. I think it errs on the side of like, being a little bit more fear-based and negative, but that's, if you can read that and balance it with some of the positives, I think it can give you a good dose of reality about just kind of the nature of raising kids in this technology age. And then unfortunately, we're out of time for our question and answer. If you do have questions for me specifically, or you want more information, definitely just let me know. Tara has my email address. Otherwise, you can just find me on dort.edu. You can search for me and you'll see my picture and my email address. You can reach me that way as well. So thank you. I knew this time was going to go fast. It always does, but I appreciate your participation and the work that you do with the kids and families in your churches, and just pray that you continue to feel God's blessings as you do your work.